It's a treat for me to talk with Simon. Simon is by training an ethnographer, right? By academic training.
Back in college, yeah.
So what I think is interesting about that is it actually loops. You may not think of it this way, but to oversimplify, it is in a sense what you're still doing. You have a knack for assessing the corporate world as if it was a foreign culture, which it sometimes is, even when you're in it, and discerning the elements by which certain tribes thrive and certain tribes fail, and the nuances therein. Now, your first book, Start With Why, has been a big success, and I think has changed the way a lot of people think about how they go about kind of planning and innovation and just making their organizations and corporations work. And I want to get into some of that, but what I thought I would start with is the obvious question: why? What does parenting have to do with leadership?
They are from an anthropological standpoint, exactly the same. If you think about Homo sapien, we've been on this planet about 50,000 years, of which the modern day company or corporation hasn't existed for very long, and neither has the nation state. And the thing that predates all of these things is the family and the tribe. And so the new tribe is the company. And the new family is your group, And it's very funny to me when people describe their work experiences as it's like a family. It's not like a family, it is a family. And it obeys all the same rules and laws as any relationship building in a family. The parents are the bosses, the leaders. And the reason I ask it is because there's been an uncomfortable chain of events that have happened over the past 30, 40 years that have changed the notion and changed the way in which these organizations run, where they are no longer like families, which is very destructive to the human animal. For example, if you were having a hard year, would you get rid of one of your children? Right? So, we want to keep the Mercedes, so we're going to have to let one of you go. You're a little smarter, it's you, It was a very hard decision, We wouldn't dream of doing that. We would get rid of the Mercedes and we would go from, name brand Cheerios to generic brand Cheerios for a while until we figured it out. But then if you look at organizations, if you look at companies, layoffs have become far more prevalent in our modern day than they ever used to be. The funny thing is they never really existed as a business philosophy prior to the 1980s. Sure, it existed here and there, mainly as a last resort, but never as a first line of defense. We miss the numbers. The first thing we're going to do is completely destroy someone's life. I'm sorry, you're going to have to go home and tell your spouse that you no longer have a source of income because we have to make the numbers this year, And forget about the people who lost their jobs. What about the people who kept their jobs? Because what that does is it sends a signal to the rest of the organization that we don't really value you. And this becomes ingrained in the culture of these organizations. And so the question of are you a good parent has a direct relationship to are you a good leader? They are one in the same. And having had the honor of getting to spend some time with good and bad leaders, whether they're in large companies or small companies, whether they're in manufacturing or packaged goods or service industry, whether they're in the military or politics, what I find the common thread in all of these great leaders is they view the people in their care as their kids. Always. And they want to see their kids grow up and gain an education, be disciplined when necessary, be given opportunities to try and fail. Sometimes they'll help them up and sometimes they won't, all with the single purpose that they will grow up and achieve more than we could have ever achieved for ourselves. It is the same mentality. So if you think you're a good parent, the question is, are you translating those great skills over to where you are in a leadership position in the responsibility and have the responsibility for the care of other human beings? The Economist ran one of those intimidatingly large center sections that they do a few months ago about the decline of innovation in the world. And they had this big assessment and, in any number of ways of measuring it, including but not confined to the number of patents filed, and even the number of patents filed aren't that significant, haven't been that significant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they wanted to try explain the decline of innovation. And they went through any number of factors, technology, the internet, global economies, and yet there was not a single word devoted to human beings. I couldn't believe that. Your spreadsheets don't come up with innovation, they don't come up with good ideas, people do. And so it raises a question, if people are not giving us their best thinking, there has to be a reason for that. We're not getting stupider. It's not that there's a lack of ideas. It's not that people don't have ideas. It's that they're either not giving them to us or we're not listening to them and we're not providing a forum where those ideas are given an opportunity to try and fail and try and fail and try and fail and then succeed. The problem with leadership, like parenting, is it cannot be measured on a daily basis. It is like exercise. I can give you all the science and numbers of people, that prove that exercise is good for your health and helps you live longer, and you might be compelled by my science, and you'll go to the gym and you'll come home from the gym and you'll look in the mirror and you'll see nothing. And you'll go to the gym the next day and you'll come back and you'll look in the mirror and you'll see nothing. Worse, you're in pain, And the problem is because you can measure the pain easily and you can measure the time you're spending, but you don't see benefit, you might quit. But if you look at a picture of yourself 3 months from before, you're like, I can't believe I ever looked like that. There's not a single person here that knows on a daily basis if you're a good parent. You have no clue. You get glimmers of hope when you see your child accomplish something. You're like, I'm doing something right. You catch your kid reading under their blankets late at night. It makes you feel good, You really will not know if you've actually done a good job for 30 years. Right? But you have a sense of what a good parent should do, and it's done whatever you do is done with love, and it's done with the absolute obsession with the care of this human being. So leadership is exactly the same way. That's the problem, is it cannot be measured in small, discrete packets. That's the problem. We can measure market share, revenue, income, and all the rest of it in daily, discrete packets. And so if we see a decline because of X, we put our resources into that. And these things, this is the unintended byproduct of running an organization like that, which is that has a cumulative effect over time. Just like eating a piece of chocolate cake doesn't do any damage. Eating a piece of chocolate cake every day has a cumulative effect. The negative is not bad, it's the combination. And we now have this twisted mentality that we can solve problems with intensity, but it's consistency that produce the problems and it's consistency that will fix the problems. In other words, you cannot be healthy by having a cleanse once a month. It doesn't work. You can be healthy by eating well every single day. The great thing about consistency is you can screw it up a couple times. In other words, if you're doing things consistently well, which includes leadership, you actually earn the capacity that you can have royal screw-ups now and then. If you live a healthy lifestyle, have a Big Mac. It does nothing, right? But the opposite is true. If you're doing it badly every day, if the organization has dysfunctional leadership, then just having a big offsite and bringing some kumbaya consultant in, and it does nothing. It does nothing. It feels good for the day. That's it. And you trick yourself into thinking that it was healthy, like that cleanse. I don't subscribe to any of these, what are the 4 characteristics of leaders? You have to have charisma. You have to have vision. Those aren't necessarily true. And they're not universal. And there are some people who are visionary, and there are some people who are not. So both can make decent leaders. The one characteristic, and I've only been able to find one, that I'm absolutely comfortable saying that all great leaders have, only one, is courage. Because sometimes being a leader means you have to go first. In fact, that's why we call them leaders, right? In other words, everyone in the organization knows what has to be done, but who's going to volunteer to do it? Most people go, just wait and see what happens. It's management, It's their problem. I don't have control over the CEO. I'm not the CEO. You are not a leader. Leaders are the ones who say, I could get my head cut off here, I'll give it a try. And what ends up happening is others follow. But if you get your head cut off, then you have to go find another job. That's the risk you run. Leadership comes at tremendous risk.
So there are many styles of parenting, right? There's tough love, there's the helicopter parent, there's the coddlers, there's the permissive parent. Any one of those could be defined in their own universe as a good parent. And not to get hung up on the metaphor, if it is a metaphor, but you actually, I think earlier you were talking to me about how this is the same biological. There's actually, it's not just metaphorical. There's a closer link here.
This is objective.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding the openness that you're offering people, which I think is actually a positive one, that there could be
Many
likewise styles of leadership.
of positive leadership, yes.
So explain the nuances there.
Steve Jobs was a good leader. He was not a nice guy. You don't have to be nice to be a good leader. In other words, I'm meeting these 23-year-old, startup CEOs in Silicon Valley who've read, Isaacson's book, and now they're acting like assholes because they think that's what will make them the next Steve Jobs. If you are an asshole, then you may or may not have to be nice. I mean, it's nice to be nice. I mean, I try to be nice, but in other words, this forcing ourselves to change who we are, I don't think is it. It's all about what you see the objective, and a good parent doesn't see the objective as get a bigger house. A good parent sees the objective as look after my children. A good CEO, good leader sees their objective not as accomplish the mission or grow the bottom line. Those are all good things as a result of, but a good leader sees themselves as how do I get the best out of my people? And understand that fundamentally the success of a family is the family, it's the people in it, not the size of the house, and the success of an organization is the people who want to come to work. And I'll probably say this tomorrow, but leadership is not about authority. They are not the same things. We all know many people who are in very senior positions who are not leaders. We do as they say because they have authority over us, but we wouldn't follow them. We've all had bosses who, no matter what, we would follow them anywhere. We don't care what company they went to, we don't care if it was glamorous or unglamorous, we would follow them anywhere. That's because they were leaders, and the reason we would follow them is because we know that they actually cared about us. They made us more confident in our own work, they got more out of us than we thought we were capable of, and we will follow them anywhere. That has nothing to do with authority. We all know some very junior people who have no authority, but absolutely are leaders. They stand up every single day to help somebody next to them do better. They don't say, do you need my help? They simply go help them, And so the intention is to encourage and reward that kind of behavior, and ideally not reward the other behavior. What's fascinating about organizations, we're hierarchical animals, and we take our cues from our leaders. It's normal human interaction. So little things have compounding effects. For example, somebody calls the CEO's office, CEO's secretary picks up the phone. The person says, can I talk to him, And the CEO goes, tell him I'm not here. That CEO has just sanctioned lying in the company. That's what that was. That was a lie. I am here. You could say, tell him I'll call him back. It's perfectly legitimate. But tell him I'm not here has now unofficially sanctioned lying in the organization, so that now the person now that secretary can tell a lie to somebody, who can tell a lie to somebody, who can tell a lie to somebody, and then we're so amazed that we don't trust each other, And so it's the same thing. If I'm willing to trust you to try and you fail and you won't get fired, you won't get reprimanded. In fact, if anything, I'll sit down with you and be like, all right, try again, because I think you're onto something here. What that will promote is a culture of trying, giving it a whirl. Which produces remarkable things, because the people always know more than the CEOs, than the leaders, always. David Marquet, who's an amazing leadership sort of theorist about this, he's a former naval commander. If you're into this, he wrote an amazing book called Turn the Ship Around. He talks about this, how the people at the top of the organization have all the authority but none of the information. The people at the bottom of the organization have all the information but none of the authority. And it's not about pushing the information up, it's about pushing the authority down. Leadership has become a bad, we've destroyed leaders, and partially it's our own doing, which again goes back to the 1980s, late 1970s, when we were experimenting with how to incentivize the outside managers that we brought in to run our companies, and we came up with this shareholder thing where we gave them stock to reward them, and so we incentivized them to grow the stock, not the people, and so we changed the incentive systems, and volatility is now a good thing, right? Because you can bet on it. And stability is no longer the thing we incentivize. I mean, if you incentivize growth but not stability, you get large unstable organizations. So I think it's partially our own doing. I think we incentivize bad leadership. I mean, I think that's what we do. Good leadership, once again, is not rewarded in the short term, it's rewarded in the long term.